One great thing about taking a hiatus from writing is you get to see your work in progress in a whole new light. What's up, writers? I'm Newkirk and welcome to my channel. So I know it's been a while since I posted a new video. It's been a while. My last video was about 8 or 9 months ago, but I've honestly needed to take a hiatus from writing. As you know, writing a book is no small feat. It requires focus, planning, and motivation, but it also comes with worry, fear, doubt, and stress, and that can sometimes be more difficult to navigate. Those are things that I've dealt with and still do deal with from time to time as I make the journey to self-publish my novel. And as a result, I took a hiatus from writing. And I'll be honest, this hiatus was pretty much unplanned. That was the reason for my absence off of social media, off of my Twitter and YouTube and the likes. I needed to clear my head and start fresh. But I'll be honest, that hiatus was the best thing that happened to me. After the hiatus, I have been able to pretty much fully flesh out a complete, mostly new story. So, in this video, I want to share 5 things that I've learned about myself and about my writing process while I was on this hiatus. And at the end of the video, I'll give you all a little bit of an update as to where I am on my novel. But before we get into that, if you are interested in following the journey of my novel from start to finish, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. And don't forget to hit that bell icon so you can be notified every time I drop a new video. So with that being said, let's get started. It's been a while. One great thing about taking a hiatus from writing is you get to see your work in progress in a whole new light. You realize what you've been doing wrong and why you've been working on the same project for the past 7 years with pretty much minimal progress. Since my last video about 8 or 9 months ago, I have been making, or had been making, minimal progress with my novel. And I was just becoming more and more frustrated. And it wasn't until after the hiatus that I realized what I was doing wrong. I was being too ambitious. I was initially trying to make this book the first of a trilogy. And as a result, I was leaving a lot of unanswered questions unanswered because I was planning to answer them in future books. I had always seen myself as a science fiction and fantasy author who was going to come out with this debut trilogy and that it was going to be, just awesome in every way. But this hiatus has made me realize that I don't need to start off with a trilogy. Writing a trilogy as a first-time author, that's a little too ambitious, at least for me. I could simply start off with a standalone book. This is the first book that I'm going to publish. If I advertise this new debut novel as the first book of a trilogy and it doesn't sell well, no one is going to want to read the rest of my books. On the other hand, if I write this standalone novel and it doesn't do so well, I can use that feedback to improve my next book. But if this standalone book is successful, then I know what works for my second project. And I don't need to pressure myself into writing a huge project like a trilogy, at least not in the near future. The second thing that I learned from my hiatus is how to fix my second act. In addition to being too ambitious, I was having trouble in the middle of the book, around the second act, or at least the first half of the second act. I knew what I wanted the beginning of my book to be, and I knew what I wanted the end of my book to be. But I was having trouble getting the characters from point A, the beginning, to point C, the end. I was having trouble finding out what is that point B, what's the middle that they need to go through in order to get to the end. And so, after some research, I found a method that was really helpful to me. And that method is reverse outlining. Basically, with a reverse outline, you start at a point where you know you want the characters to end up, and then you work backwards figuring out how they got to that point. For me, that point was the midpoint of the novel, where my main character Duncan learns what it is he needs to learn. I knew that I wanted him to learn this special information near the middle of Act 2, near the middle of the novel, and I knew that I wanted him to start Act 2 with the investigation. But I was having trouble branching those 2 points, the beginning of the investigation and him learning the important thing that he needs to learn. And so I worked backwards. I thought of ways for Duncan to get to that midpoint logically and realistically, thinking about how he learned about those clues, thinking about what obstacles he may have faced getting there. And then I just repeated that process a couple of times, and just like that, my muddy middle was fixed. And speaking of working backwards, that brings me to the third thing I learned: how to pace. I think I may have mentioned this in previous videos, but just in case I haven't, in previous drafts I had either rushed things too much or dragged things out too long, especially in Act 2. And as a result, the pace of the book was very uneven. On one end, I would drag things out too long and have Duncan going from place to place to place, learning all these little bit of clues before finding out the big reveal, I guess you can say, in the middle of the book. And as a result, it was dragging things out way too long. But then, when I would try to fix that, I would swing to the opposite side of the spectrum and rush things. But I'll be honest, there were 2 things that really helped me with pacing. One was the Save the Cat outlining method, and the second was withholding information. For those of you that don't know, Save the Cat is an outlining method that's usually used for screenwriters, but it has been adopted for novelists as well. To summarize, there are 15 beats that a story hits when using the Save the Cat method. And knowing what those beats were and when they should come up was extremely helpful for me, especially when I was outlining backwards. It made me see what beats I had been missing and why sometimes the story didn't make sense. It was because there were these certain beats and scenes that need to happen that weren't happening, and as a result, it was making things confusing. And as for withholding information, I had to keep reminding myself that just because I know all the secrets of the story doesn't mean that the characters know. The characters' knowledge and the knowledge of the readers is limited to what I want to tell them. So I found myself wanting to instinctively give away exposition or clues, but looking back, it wouldn't have made sense for those characters to have learned that information. That kind of goes back to the pacing problem where I would rush things. I was giving away the clues too early. The purpose of a mystery thriller is to engage the reader and to have them try and solve the crime along with the main character. Honestly, I think that line of thinking of revealing so much information probably is coming from my time of being a dungeon master for my D&D campaign. But I've learned how to slowly parse out information through the characters and to the reader. And I found a way to do it in an engaging but realistic way so that the readers get the answers to their questions, but at the same time, another question is asked, and so they have to turn the page to keep reading in order to answer that question. And then another question is answered, and so on and so forth. Pacing is really important. The fourth thing that I've learned during my hiatus is how to fix all my plot holes. Once I started fresh and came to see my project as a single standalone book and not a trilogy, I was able to see all the plot holes in my book. And I was able to do some world building in order to answer and fill in those questions and plot holes that were coming up. Some of those plot holes involved questions such as, why can't Duncan simply go to the authorities for help? Or, what's stopping my villain from completing her task? Or, what's stopping the authorities from killing all investigations into this thing that is happening? But now that I have a single standalone book, I can answer all those questions and I don't need to leave any plot threads or unanswered questions hanging in the air. I've changed around characters, I've gotten rid of characters, I've had to add characters, and after doing all that, I've managed to come out with a pretty concise single story outline that I'm really excited to get started with writing the first draft on. Which leads me to number 5. I've learned how to tell my story my way. I'll be honest, this one was the biggest hurdle that I've had to overcome during this hiatus. I like to read other books and watch movies in my genre for inspiration, to get an idea of how to write and how to pace and how to tell a good story. And while I knew I was doing these things as research and to see how others were working in their craft, I kept finding myself slipping into the mindset of I need to do what they're doing in order to be successful. Like I said, it's been a while since I've been on YouTube. It's been a while. And I'm sure I mentioned this in another video, but just in case I haven't, I have a tendency to try and follow in others' footsteps, thinking that will work for me because it worked for them. Obviously, it hasn't. But over this hiatus, I've been able to break off from that kind of thinking and simply see books and movies as more of a guideline and not something to adhere to. What works for one author is not going to work for another. I've also found that in order to tell my story my way, I don't just write what I know, I write what I want to know. When you write about what you want to know, your passion about that topic will become apparent when people read your book. So what about you all? Have you ever had to take a hiatus from writing? What happened and what did you learn from that hiatus? Go ahead and drop your stories in the comments below. I want to see what my fellow writers have had to deal with and hopefully get a conversation going. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, the updated status of my novel. I'm proud to announce that I have a new working title for my project. The new working title of my cyberpunk thriller is The Alakine Protocol. I may do an updated AuthorTube work in progress tag video, seeing as the first video is kind of old and outdated, especially since it's no longer a first book of a trilogy. Well, there you have it. Those are 5 things that I've learned from my hiatus. I'm really excited to get back and start writing on this new first draft. So, until next time, keep writing, and I'll see you in the next video.